Hello. Welcome, everyone. Great to see you all here for the Stacking Enterprises chat, I guess. Yeah, really exciting to have you all here. We're here with Nic, Tim, and Matt, and each of them will introduce themselves as we go through this first round of questions. And then I'm going to ask a few questions up here, and then we're going to open it up so that we can have questions from all of you. So start writing down your questions from the beginning, and we'll get to you shortly. Just a quick intro, who am I? I'm Abby Rose. I'm a co-creator at Farmerama Radio, which is a podcast sharing the voices of the regenerative farming. And then I also make an app. My company, VitaCycle, we make an app called Soil Mentor. You might have seen us over there. And then I do actually also farm in Chile, even though I'm based here. So quite confusing, that bit. But anyway, so it's a real pleasure to be here and pleasure to be talking with three farmers. This talk was actually brought together by the Nature Friendly Farming Network, who many of you may have heard of. They're a really great group. They do a lot of policy work, but also a lot of on-the-ground work with farmers, really trying to help everyone shift in a direction of more nature-friendly farming. So, yes, this panel session is about exploring pioneering business models, this concept of stacking enterprises, essentially. So many of you probably have heard of the concept. It's the idea that you can have multiple aspects or multiple animals, let's say, in one field, one after the other. So maybe you have cows, followed by chickens, followed by sheep, and that each of those is a different enterprise that is allowing you to, or each of those a different business. So you're stacking the businesses on top of each other in the same farming system. I'm sure you guys have better descriptions of it than me. But yes, and so all of those different elements benefit each other is a key part of that as well. So they're not just completely separate, they're feeding into each other and benefiting each other. So I think one of the things we're talking about today that's a little bit different than just that is that, in the stacking regenerative systems at a farm level, that's something that people focus on quite often. So improving soil, how that improves soil health, how it brings up biodiversity, and that those are closed-loop farming systems. But what's exciting to broaden that out a bit is to also think about what does it mean from a community perspective. What is it from an agroecological point of view? What does it mean to stack enterprises? How can you be building collaboration, stewardship, and regeneration all in one system? And that's what you three are all focusing on in different ways. And I think that's really exciting, really expanding this idea of stacking enterprises. So I'm going to start with you, Nic. Nic Renison, I met about 10 years ago almost. I think we were both pretty early in our thinking on this at the time. But it was exciting. We did a Farmerama interview in the early days. You farm with your husband, Reno, sorry, that's the American in me, in Cumbria. You grew up on a dairy farm, which was a much more conventionally focused dairy farm. So it was only once you started farming for yourself, I think 2012, that you started to ask some of these questions and look into what it meant to farm more regeneratively. And you now have 80 suckler cows with laying hens following the cows around in an eggmobile, and also a handful of woodland pigs. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about Renison's farm.
Thanks, Abby. Hello, everyone. So I'm Nic, and I farm with my husband, Reno, in Cumbria. And I guess the reason we started stacking was probably inspired by Joel Salatin, really, and the likes of Richard Perkins. And so we kind of started down the regenerative route, and then we started looking at watching YouTube, reading books, and we realized that, I know when I was growing up, my dad always wanted more acres of land, and we don't want more acres. We want the acres we've got to really be singing. So yeah, we started with chickens, and then we got some pigs. We did have a lot of sheep, but we haven't got sheep anymore. They don't stack so well. And then we do glamping, and we also have quite a lot of meetings on the farm. And we also, I'm part of a conference inspired actually by Groundswell called Carbon Calling, which is a conference in Cumbria and one in FarmEd this year. And it's all to do with farmers talking to farmers, because I'm a great believer in this regenerative movement, that we keep it very farmer-based, and it's a farmer movement. And yeah, that's what we stack.
Yeah, so farm, it's almost like you're stacking the farmer-to-farmer knowledge exchange as part of all of your cows and then your hens and then...
Yeah. So I guess when you're just thinking of going down this path, because I know when we first got pigs, and I was used to cows bulling and you know, kind of looking after cattle, but the very first time we saw a pig hogging, as in heat, we thought she was ill. So every time you get a different enterprise, you have to learn about that enterprise. And I think the danger is, because you think you can look after cattle, you don't necessarily know your way around other enterprises. So it's been a learning journey, and now we have people coming onto the farm and yeah, just picking up practical points really about how to do stuff.
Great, thank you. And Tim May, you farm at Kingsclere Estates. We also met about 10 years ago here at Groundswell, actually, in the early days. You guys, 2,500 acres. And when we met, you were still farming conventionally at the time. So it's been a transition over the last 10 years to organic and now regenerative. And the vision at Kingsclere is to regenerate the estate for a fertile future by encouraging the growth of a circular community of growers, farmers, producers, and local businesses. It's a really beautiful vision, I think. And you also, oh, bummer, there it is. He gave me a flyer. I don't know if any of you have seen this, but they run an annual pitch-up competition, which is, well, maybe, Tim, I'll let you explain a little bit about that. Tell me a bit about Kingsclere Estates and what is the pitch-up competition?
Yeah, sure, Abby, thank you. Yeah, so Kingsclere Estates, really well introduced, thank you. Probably regenerative first and then organic afterwards, actually. But I did a Nuffield scholarship in 2011. At that time, we were broadacre farming, min-till and direct drilling and stuff. And on the back of the Nuffield, I wrote a report on understanding and implementing sustainability. I really thought a lot about economic sustainability. Realised that broadacre arable land really had limited options to compete with inflation, and so needed to improve our productivity within our land holding somehow. It was pretty clear from doing the scholarship and just from being a observant human that in order to do that on our farm, we need to improve our diversity and the amount of operations that went on, so improve the complexity within our business as opposed to trying to do it through monocropping or single types of operations. So in order to get that level of complexity, we needed to get more people involved in the farm. And those people, I'd struggle to be a farmer and manager sort of relationship, because we needed much more brain power at that higher level, that thinking level, and much more entrepreneurial sort of activity. So that's why we've launched the pitch up idea, which is to encourage people with new ideas, with ideas or existing businesses even within food production, so raw material production, be it milk or grain or whatever, or vegetables. Value adding, so making that milk into cheese, or retail. So along all the three of those streams, we want those people to come and work with us to build this circular economy, because there's no way I can do it on my own. I haven't got the brain power to do it on my own, and I think the opportunities within that farming system are pretty huge. So, yeah.
And maybe you could just say, like, I know you have the outdoor dairy or the outdoor milking enterprise. You have the rabbit food enterprise. What are the other things that are stacked there?
Yeah, so at the moment we're still fledgling. Actually, we've got great ambition to do lots of enterprises. So the successful one really is the roaming dairy, which is a first generation farmer called Ollie. He's in the audience here. He came to us with an idea to implement a dairy on our grazing land, and from my findings from from my Nuffield, we needed it to be mobile, had to travel around, and that's why we got this mobile parlour. And that enables us to take the cows to where the food is and to move them on again, and then that allows other enterprises to come in behind. We've been playing with chickens to get them to work out how to get the scale to work behind. And then, like you say, the year before's pitch up winners was a company called Munch, who they forage around the estate, picking leaves and branches to dry them out to send up to London for rabbit food, for the pet food industry. And it's something I'd never have thought of, really. So.
No, me neither. It's very specialty foraged food. I like it. And then Matt Swarbrick.
Yep.
So you're a permaculture-inspired farmer at Henbant in North Wales, and an ecologist and filmmaker by background. But you at the Henbant team are on a mission to prove that with a small farm you can produce good food, financial profit, build soil and biodiversity, build a community, and enjoy it all at the same time. Brilliant. I'm in on that vision. And so you have an 80-share CSA scheme, and you produce enough eggs, beef, and veg for 80 local families from your silvopasture systems. Maybe you could share a little bit more about Henbant, and that you're now working with the Wildlife Trust to what you're exploring there as well.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Abby. So we kind of set off. Well, actually, we just set off to become we just wanted to grow babies and cabbages. Like I said, so I was a filmmaker and an ecologist. I grew up. I was desperate to be a farmer, but that just wasn't something that was an option to us. And I made a TV series called Frozen Planet, and at the end of that, we had this really awkward conversation with Discovery Channel, and they were like, "Oh, can we not really talk about climate change so much?" And I thought, you know what, and I was also doing a lot of time abroad, so I thought, right, we're going to become a farmer. And I met this guy in a pub in Bristol, and he was like, "Look, you just stay silent, I'll do the talking, and we'll just find the money for you to buy a farm." And so we did that, and we landed in North Wales, and we were like, and the babies and cabbages bit is so easy. But then we had this massive mortgage. We're like, shit, okay, we've got to pay this mortgage. So we had to become farmers. And it's the most important job in the world, isn't it? What an incredible privilege to be a farmer. But we didn't really have a clue what we were doing. But we were ecologists. And so we can move into that with that idea of going, look, how does an ecosystem work? And that permaculture, that let's just run a farm as an ecosystem, has been the backbone of everything we've done. So, like I say, and one thing is that particularly that threw us out of that small holding space into wanting to feed people was I think you're only as resilient as your neighbour and your community. Mm-hmm. And so feeding our community was a huge part of our context. And so this idea of actually producing enough food to feed 80 families that are ideally as close as possible to the farm is that context. We do it we've got a big no-dig market garden. We've basically broken the whole wood up into these really quite sexy silvopasture systems. We've now got 80 days, day-size grazing units around that. So we've got it's all establishing, but the farm's working really well. But the people side, I would say, is the kind of biggest element of kind of making it work. In terms of, so there's me and my wife, we've got 3 employed in the team, and then we've got this whole little pack of waifs and strays that come along as well. We run an internship really with that. So that kind of getting other people to do the same thing has become a massive part of our context. And actually, in breaking into the local community, we just started doing all this really interesting stuff with the local council, and we've been doing cooking courses. But actually, it's and you think, oh look, these kids don't really know what a carrot looks like, and then you look around and you think, the teacher doesn't know either. And it's really so that's a really valuable part of what we started doing as well now. And then the Wildlife Trust stuff is basically the whole mountain behind our farm came up for sale. And I thought, well, this is our whole watershed. And I sent this message to the Wildlife Trust going, look, how about you buy it and we'll farm it? And I thought, worst case, if they bought it, the worst it could be is we've got a really nice watershed. Anyway, and then 3 days later, this lady turned up and she said, okay, let's do it. Anyway, so we're now looking at how we move into this space of actually expanding that kind of, expanding out of the farm across our watershed. Yeah.
So you really are working at the community level. The farm is part of the community, it sounds like, and then recognizing the watershed is also part of the whole system. So you better.
I think so.
Yeah.
We really wanted to be kind of like landed in that valley, the watershed, and feeding people around us. I've got to say is so powerful in terms of like we're I'm this weird English guy that landed in a bit of Wales and does something completely different, and we somehow no one's really spotted it locally yet. They might have done, but they've not said anything. But feeding the community allows us to do all sorts of stuff, and it kind of gives us quite a big leniency and quite a lot of people are quite sympathetic, I think, to what we're doing, and that's been a big part of making Henbant work.
I do think it's really exciting with all three of you. I know that Joel Salatin, for example, has had some criticism that the way his stacking enterprises worked was actually not very supportive of the other people running those enterprises, or also a lot of volunteers were required, and so people were critical of how he framed it. And so I think it's really interesting that all three of you are finding ways to not just have these stacked enterprises at that farm level, but actually have it be about that community and be about building relationships with other human beings at the same time as building relationships in the ecosystem. And I think, it feels so much stronger for a long-term situation. So I know that, the Nature Friendly Farming Network, they recently released a report called Rethink Food. And in that, they highlighted that there are a number of barriers preventing many in the industry, so both established businesses and young entrants, from adopting regenerative, nature-friendly systems on a wider scale. So they identified some of those barriers, such as lack of access to land, the perceived tension between profits and nature-friendly farming, lack of suitable support systems and training, peer pressure, that's a good one, and challenges in mindset change, as well as a lack of access to capital for upfront costs. So in some ways, what you're all doing are speaking to some of those in different ways, and stacking enterprises can address some of those barriers. So Tim, I wanted to ask you first, maybe you could share, you already did share a bit, but maybe go a little bit further into how Kingsclere Estates, how are you addressing some of those barriers, I guess? And also, how does it work from a business point of view for you?
Okay, I'm going to have to try and remember those barriers again. But
okay, sorry.
I think the access to land thing is quite important and quite interesting. Me and Ollie were chatting about this on the way up in the car this morning, and I guess what we're trying to offer is the ability to farm without land. Yeah. So Ollie's mobile milking parlour. He's got a sale-ready dairy farm that could go anywhere in the country, which is completely different to most other dairy farms. You've got to sell the cows and the farm and the land that goes with it. So by setting up this, using this mobile infrastructure, we can create almost landless farms or farming systems that aren't tied by the constraints of land ownership, or land tenure in that block. So that's number one. What was the other one?
Well, I asked also, from a business point of view, how does it work for you?
Okay, yeah. From a business, because we're, I guess because we've got scale, the individual businesses can operate as a sole, dairy farm or a foraging business or whatever, and then it needs someone then to be like the conductor to make that all integrate, and so that's how I operate as the person that integrates all the stuff, as opposed to doing the individual activity. I do the arable farming. But yeah, the other stuff, I make sure it all fits into each other. So because we've got the scale, that's how the business works.
And so that, I think I remember you saying that looked like you provide all the equipment or own all the, or in different situations, you have different agreements around what that sharing looks like. Is that right?
Yeah, so the share farming model we use at the moment, we kind of try and understand what the business can put in and what we can put in. And we would contribute whatever we contribute, whether it is machinery or just land or expertise or whatever. And that then creates a figure as to what we've both put in, and then we take from the output price, say from the milk price, we take a percentage of what we put in. So we both get the same return on our investment.
Yeah.
But generally the person doing the farming has a much greater stake. But it means they're not paying rent up front, they're not doing any of that stuff. And when times are tough, it's tough for us both. So we both have to then put our heads down and work out how to get out of the hole. And when times are great, we both enjoy the holidays together.
Yeah, great. It's nice that you're sharing that risk throughout, I guess. That makes a big difference. And I wonder, do either of you have something to add to that in terms of how stacking enterprises can unlock some of the barriers to agroecological or regenerative farming for others?
I think it's doing this kind of agriculture. It's very easy to work with the public, and it looks good, and it's very easy to sell. It's not like you're farming in a kind of big shed and you have to put special clothes on to go into the shed. It's very visual, so people can come onto the farm, see what we do things, see how we do things, and then buy stuff. And then talk about it. So it's a place that people want to be, rather than a farm with a gate on that says keep out.
Yeah, so true. Anything to add?
Yeah, I just think it's that by having those different enterprises, like I think to come along and to see these different enterprises and go, oh, look, I can do all those things is quite a dangerous space to be in. And I think actually, these diversified led farms do need more people power in them. But actually, with the right, that right little bit of business sense as well, they can pay for that. I'm not saying it's really easy. I'm really, really not. But they can kind of do that. And I just think that all of a sudden, you've got a farm that would have had one farmer. I mean, it's 80 acres. It wouldn't have even supplied one income, and is now supporting a whole team of people actually.
Yeah, and it's better for you as well, surely.
Well, it makes it a lot of fun, a core part of our context. And I think one thing that's always missing out that regenerative agriculture description is actually, it's got to be enjoyable, and if it's not regenerative. And that, to me, involves to some people, it might involve having no other people involved at all. But for me, that's about having people on farm.
Totally. And Nic, you've been a pioneer in facilitating these spaces for shared learning, hands-on sessions, and rooted in openness and connection through learning. And you're a co-organizer of Carbon Calling, obviously, as you said, a conference for farmers, by farmers. And I love that real focus on the farmer-to-farmer communication. And so how does this idea of catalyzing opportunities for shared learning stack into your farm business? How did you begin to set up these different learning opportunities? And also for others here who may want, that really calls them as well. Is there space for other people to do that? What do you think?
Well, I guess when we first started, the very first step for us on the regenerative thing was going to see the Nellises. Angus Nellis is here today, actually, and they're amazing farmers in Northumberland. And I remember Renaud coming back through the kitchen door and saying, "What the hell have I been doing?" And that was all that was going to a farm who were really nailing rotational grazing and mixed enterprises, and seeing how they were utilising their grass, how they were grazing, how they were set up. And we didn't learn that stuff at college. We don't do anything particularly jazzy, but our doors are always open, gates are always open, and we run courses that go through the things like setting up water systems, doing the electrics, all the when to move stuff, all the very basic stuff. And I think and we're still very much on the journey, and we're still learning things. And it's just really nice for a farmer to talk to another farmer and say, "I'm here, you're there. Let's talk about how to get there." And it's all those little questions that only if you're a practitioner you can know. Yeah. And the same goes for the veg and the permaculture. We're just learning on that, but there's so many little bitty questions that only if you've done it you'll know.
Totally. I really
so what I'm saying is, if you're a farmer, just let and you're kind of doing stuff, just let people come and see you and talk to you.
Yeah, and everyone benefits. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
In that learning space. And Matt, At Henbant, your holistic management and diversified income streams at a small but profitable and productive scale. That's a big focus, as we've spoken about. So how did you begin to scale up the enterprises you've stacked across your farm? And how does this help you move towards a more agroecological and community-focused farm? Like, how did you bring in other people? And you know, you couldn't have. Did you start with 80 CSA shares?
No. We kind of started everything small. Like I said, we almost kind of started out small holding, you know. And we had like 3 cows and 20 sheep, and we did like 10 veg boxes for the neighbours. And at first, on this like sharing the farm model, we were always like, look, we need to be really careful. We never grow beyond what me and my wife can do, because at the time we had volunteers coming onto the farm. And then that kind of became more valuable. And you go and you almost start doing stuff because it creates that learning opportunity. Like when we started farming, I was like, there's so many things that you just can't read anywhere. And actually what we did for the first couple of years, we actually employed a local farmer's son, because he knew all these little secret things about, you know, like there's so many things that you all know that I will probably never know. But so it was all about just kind of starting steadily. And then we said we were never going to grow beyond what me and my wife could do. And then one day we were like, oh, we've got no chance of doing this by ourselves. And actually, each of these enterprises has got like a critical mass to it, you know? And I do worry sometimes going, so I was like for us, that kind of veg box at 80 shares just about creates an income for a grower. And you know, and having a kind of certain cattle, I mean, we've only got 300 chickens, and I think actually we could do 600, but it's just about pays for its time. And it's recognizing that actually we need to upscale this to a point that it genuinely is paying for my time to go across the field. Yeah, that's
Yeah. Totally. And I guess in a way, you don't always, I mean, you can do as many spreadsheets as you like to think what that number may be, but until you actually start doing it, it's very hard to predict exactly how long it's going to take you to do things and exactly what's involved in that. So it is a bit of learning whilst doing.
It's a big learning while doing, isn't it? And it's just a matter of going, actually, like now, you know, it's taking like 50 days for my chickens to get back to where they started. And I go, well, maybe, you know, like 2 chicken houses, we could go a little bit faster. Maybe a 30-day rotation, it'd be fine. And it's just keep pushing those edges, isn't it? And every so often, you know, we've got a few too many cows, actually, right now. You get a little bit, you can push those edges a bit far as well.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and Tim, I know when you talked about scaling up, or I think from my memory, you had a moment where you were like, well, actually, you referred to earlier, it's about building in more complexity into the system than it is kind of like scaling up a system. Do you have, anything more to say on that?
Yeah, I suppose that came from looking at our landholding and thinking, you know, if we were to go into to try and make the old broadacre farming more profitable, we'd have to go and rent more land or farm more land and then make other people's land better, when actually if I stopped and made my own land better, it'd probably be a better investment of my time.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
that makes sense. So I was wanting to open up to any questions in the audience at this point. If anyone has anything they would like to ask people. There's a lady, very helpful, here who's going to come and bring a mic to you. So just wait for the mic, please, if possible.
Thank you. How did you make the decision on what to stack?
On what to stack?
Yeah.
How did you make the decision on what to stack?
Well, for us, it was the cows, and then the cows and chickens just work so well together, yeah, it's that is, I think that for us was a good starting point, because it's just a symbiotic relationship and you end up with these amazing eggs that are just incredible eggs. And it looks good. You can bring people around to see it. I mean, my little soapbox that I jump on quite often is, if you've got thousands of birds, layers in a shed, it's sometimes not the greatest life for a chicken, and they don't produce maybe the greatest eggs. But there's nothing to say that some of the big milk buyers couldn't promote dairy farmers having, say, 500 birds following dairy herds round in rotation. It'd just be an amazing thing amazing product to sell, amazing story. You'd have less pollution. Chickens and cows are a no-brainer.
And so you're kind of suggesting that not having it just be like that it's beautiful on the farm, but also that if people could reflect that in their eating habits or in the way it's sold, that would also be like sewing it up nicely.
Yeah, because this is great, what we all do, but this has got to happen at scale. The rivers are polluted, climate change is happening. We need to be doing this at scale and thinking about our whole food systems, not just a few pockets of loveliness around, around the country. It needs to happen at scale.
Yeah, got you. Do you have anything to comment? Yeah.
Yeah, for me, to choose how or what enterprise to stack in is the people that come and pitch their ideas to us. Generally, if they're going to be successful, they're going to be ones that we can see how that can integrate into the business. So instead of me leading the thought on what that enterprise should be, I let the ideas come to me and work out how that can integrate. So try and do it the other way around because as we've said, this is really about getting the people. So I let the people lead the way that the stacking should go.
Great, yeah. And I think for us, we were on this like mission to feed our neighbours, and actually, so it's like, well, look, we can do veg, that works. The eggs, like you say, just such a symbiotic relationship with the cattle, that's beautiful. And then the agroforestry just slips in that gap between and makes that grazing really, like, I don't know where these things stop, really, because actually, like, I'm going to go home. We've got loads like Kingsclere, like mycelium. We're going to put in the little veg rows in the market garden, and I think you can keep adding these things. But there's logical ones that are straightforward, that are financially viable, that people eat. Do you know what I mean? You do see some people stacking enterprises of just like weird stuff on weird stuff, and I think I really wanted to feed people. Yeah.
But I think there is also a risk. I've heard some people say that if you stack enterprises too much, it can be like such a stretch on your time, and so you do need to find that balance, I guess. Yeah. I don't know what you think about
that. Well, I think that to us is where the holistic management comes in so much, and actually really, really, like, I don't know, like we bought Henbant, right? And we went to visit. It's a lovely farm, Ragman's Lane Farm. And they had this thing where basically they had this beautiful kind of, the great and good of the permaculture world like descended on them as soon as they started and came up with this master plan. And they started enacting that, and I won't go into it, but it was really hard and nearly costing their relationship. And I didn't want that to happen. So having that holistic context at the core of it is really key to kind of, just kind of checking in and going, actually, if we do this enterprise, does that completely wipe out my ability to go to the beach with the kids? And does it, and that holistic management, I think, is almost essential to this kind of stacking enterprise.
Have all three of you done that? A holistic context for your farm?
I'm currently in the middle of my holistic.
Okay.
I'm becoming more holistical by the day.
I'm becoming a certified educator to pass knowledge on.
Well, that's an interesting little thread that I hadn't understood before.
And I think the holistic management course, I'm only halfway through it, but what it does is it really slows you down and makes you really know your why. And for us, it's going back to the stacking. It's since we've been doing this, and you get the different species of everything you've got. We all know that nature doesn't do monocultures. And we had a monoculture of sheep for a couple of years, and Renaud diagnosed himself with a breakdown at that point. But it's just the health of everything, the biodiversity on the farm has just increased. And so you kind of know, it feels right, doesn't it, how you've got all those different layers of diversity.
Brilliant. Do we have another question over there? And then one one behind and then one at the front.
Sorry, just to build on, I think you mentioned about sheep, and from like an arable farmer's perspective, sheep seems like the logical first step for integration, and it's probably telling that you don't have any, Tim, on more of a broad acre scale. I just wonder, you said monoculture of sheep, but if you could elaborate a bit, and is it market that's not there, or difficulty in making
why
it
no
work?
sheep, guys?
I did have sheep. I started off with sheep. There's a whole video on how we started this, and I brought 1,800 ewes and a gazillion sheep. The trouble is with sheep, I did a lovely grazing plan, and the sheep can't read it, and it just So, but they were fantastic. They were really fantastic for me, as a non-livestock person to learn how to look after sheep, how to look after livestock. The numbers, I could flex them really easy. I didn't have to worry about TB and all that sort of stuff. I could outwinter them. I could work out how the land reacted to animals. So they were great. But as I delved more into it, the dairy suited us better. And then the young stock, I now see that their grazing habit is very similar to a sheep. So I'm quite happy without sheep. But if someone wants to pitch me a sheep idea that needs about 250 sheep and is profitable instead of 2,000 sheep, then there's probably ways to make that work.
What about you with your sheep?
Sheep, I think in an arable situation that they'd be fine. I think for us, they just eat everything. So, it's getting the grazing right. And we've now got much taller covers, and it's just seems to kind of work better for us. But I think in an arable situation, they'd be fine.
I got into quite a lot of trouble with Welsh Government, actually, because I took these we had sheep, and we put all these agroforestry lanes in, and I put all this, these rows of, because we're paying for it ourselves. We don't have deep pockets. So we put these single, couple of strands of electric fence in, and then I took all these really beautiful videos and photos of these sheep doing these perfect moves around these agroforestry systems. And then they asked me to do all these talks, by which point the sheep had eaten all my trees, and we'd eaten all the sheep. So I ended up giving all these talks, going no matter, and I think it was a different context we had, because I just turned up to these things and went, just don't put sheep in these agroforestry systems. And they were like, we paid you to come and tell people to do agroforestry with sheep. So I'm staying out of that conversation from now.
Fair play. Great, thank you. And there was a lady behind. Oh, lady behind first, possible in the green. Yeah.
Hi. My question, I do quite a lot of enterprise stacking, but it doesn't sound as good as yours. I'm just a bit stressed all the time as a farmer. The one I find most difficult is the veg. We do 60 boxes 6 months a year, weekly. And this year we started getting volunteers on woofers. And my God, it's way easier having loads of free labour. But the ethics I find a little bit difficult on that, because it works because we have got free labour. It doesn't work if we don't. I just wondered how you guys think about that and what people's opinion on that is.
Yeah, I mean, we're in that space in some senses. And for a long time, it felt like free labour. And then actually now what I've realised is that for the enterprise to work, actually you kind of need some kind of paid labour. You need someone who knows what that vegetable garden and that vegetable is supposed to look like time on. But actually what's been really interesting is it's almost impossible to stop having that labour because there's such a pressure of people who want to do it. And this is what I've found, it's been almost impossible. So if I want to pay someone to come and be a farmer at Henbant, it's really hard, right? Just because I can't find the people to do it. Yeah. But if I say, look, come along, give me a summer for free and I'll teach you what we're doing, we get 250 applications a year for someone to come and help out in that garden. And so it's just a really interesting space. Actually, I'm now kind of seeing it like an opportunity for people to come and learn. And we do, we run Richard Perkins UK courses, and so they get quite a decent training. So in some ways, I've balanced it out by going, look, you leave us with a decent set of training. But also, I would find it almost impossible because there's once a week, there's someone sends a really nice email going, I really, really want to come and spend a summer at Henbant.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about this, didn't we? It's that funny balance of when you're asking someone to come work full-time on the farm and run an enterprise, there's a lot of hesitancy, and it's actually quite hard to find someone to fill that role. I don't know, Tim, you had a few thoughts on that.
That is absolutely true. And that's the realism of it. And I think there seems to be a lot of farms and estates, people that approach me and say, oh, yeah, I'd love to do what you're doing and get all this enterprise stacking, get new people in. And the truth often seems to me that there aren't a million people that want to do that. So you have to actually work quite hard to get to that level of people that want to start their own businesses up. But on the free labour, training type thing, I really took what Joel Salatin said in one of his books, I think it was Fields of Farmers, but about his internship program, and he sort of said, well, you could go to university, and we've all said that all this stuff that we're doing now we didn't learn at university. So, and you're going to spend money to go there, or you could go to a farm but we're expected to pay them for that knowledge that they're not getting from university. So it kind of fits okay with me to give them, let them work for free, because we're actually giving them something back in knowledge, and that's got a value.
Yeah, I guess that is it ultimately. Is it an exchange or is it an extraction? And that's where you have to look for yourself and understand what the exchange is, and I guess be clear about it as well with the people who are coming. And it's a really fuzzy area, I would say. And there's no clear lines here. Okay, the next question was further up here. Who was it? Can you put your hand up again? Oh, 2 people, great.
Thank you. Tim, just following on a bit, you talked about you want people to come and pitch ideas to you. I guess I've got 2 questions, really. One, not just for yourself, but for all of you, how would people come and approach you? How do I find a local farmer open or willing to me pitching ideas to them? And then also, let's say it's all successful and they've gone ahead. If there's any funding for doing that, how would you expect that funding to get shared between you as the land owner and the person who's come in to pitch, who's kind of running that enterprise?
Okay, yeah, the second bit's really complex, and it actually generally becomes on an individual basis, and that would be an individual discussion about how that would work. The first bit was, how do you come up with a successful bid, and how do you approach farmers? So for us, and for Belasky Estate up in Fife, up in Scotland, we've both done this pitch up thing. I can give you a fly afterwards, which is a round of applications throughout November for people to send applications to us with their business ideas, for us to then whittle down and work out if we can make that work. So that's the process we go through. We worked with a new entrance program this year that was run by DEFRA, trying to find the skills and trying to find what it was that people needed to present to other farmers, if they want to go to them. And I went to them with to train people in holistic management, to explain to them what it was. And if you can go to a farmer with a clear understanding of their situation, their context, and then see how that marries with your situation and your context, that's a really good point to see how both ideas can merge. You don't want to be, if you're going to go to a farmer that's less enlightened, you probably don't really want to go in there and be taking land away from their enterprise. You want to complement what they're doing, so take their byproducts, for example, or have something that's mobile, that can move around, that doesn't mean that you need to take land away from what they're already doing, because generally they're trying to spread their fixed costs over as many acres as they can, so they don't want to use that land up. There was one more thing, but I can't remember what it is. Someone else, jump in.
All right. Anyway, well, I guess, how would you both feel if someone just approached you and came up with their business idea to be part of your farming operation?
I think it'd be great. Well, I think we, and I know Matt does quite a bit on social media, so you tend to attract people through Instagram or Twitter or Facebook. But we live kind of, we're not near lots of people. So that's one of our problems. So we're kind of, we have to work a bit harder to make relationships and make things. So it's not, although I love living in the middle of nowhere, it would be quite nice to live near, a bigger, larger conurbation to get more people. Yeah.
Yeah, Tim, you wanted to
You just reminded me, social media, that was it. The reason that we took on the rabbit food company was because they had 25,000 followers on Instagram. They had a market that was readily available. So they'd done a bit of work already. They built a following. So it made, it was quite easy for us to say, yeah, you can come to us. They weren't completely just a blank bit of paper. So they actually had something there already. So they'd done some work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add to that. It's like my absolute dream that people just rock up and go, hey, I've got a good idea. I'm willing to be the person that wakes up at 4 a.m. worrying about it. Let's go for it. Like that. And I think for most open-minded farmers, that's like, it'd be great, isn't it? Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, go on.
But I was just going to say that the students that are coming out of mainstream agricultural college, I might be being outspoken here, but they're not generally in this mindset. Agricultural colleges are quite often funded by big ag, and I don't know where your people come from, but it just, if someone arrived fresh-faced and raring to go with the right mindset, we just grab them and make something work. But by us, it's a rare thing.
Totally. And there was, 10 minutes left. You had a question there, and then we've got one over there and one over there. Oh, and one in the back, sorry.
Was it here?
The guy just behind. Oh, no, he's done.
No,
All
no,
right.
it wasn't here.
Over there, then.
Pass it along, please.
Hi, sorry, apologies if you already covered this, but is there a sort of a smallest acreage that this could work at and a maximum acreage this could work at, or is that totally the wrong way of even thinking about it?
What do you think?
I think it's the gap between your ears is the determiner.
There's an amazing man called J.M. Fortier. Have you heard of him? Oh, he's lovely. Fortier. Oh, yeah. And he's in Canada. You maybe know him. And he's got an acre of land or 2 acres, and he makes it absolutely sing. And he's quite regimented. He's probably a Richard Perkins type chap. But yeah, you don't need hardly any land to grow bucketfuls of food.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then we had someone over here. Sorry, making you walk all over.
All right. The steps.
So just talking a bit about how you apportion costs and profits and benefits between different enterprises. I mean, I'm kind of familiar with doing it on one farm, so you're capturing all those profits, and it doesn't particularly matter. Like, to take the example of chickens and cows, it doesn't particularly matter to what extent the sheep or the cows benefit from the reduced parasite burden. It doesn't particularly matter what extent the chickens benefit from the flies, because it's all within the same enterprise. But if you're having different people sharing the profits and sharing the costs, how do you actually fairly apportion that out, and how do you quantify it?
So for us, we would run them. We run them all as individual businesses, and so to quantify the benefit, generally that benefit comes back to the landowner, which is me, and then that is then identified in the rental equivalent that we would put into the share, so the value of our land that we're putting into the mix.
Do you have a super accountant?
No, I just make it up.
Oh, good.
Take a feel and see what's right, and then you've got to run a few years and see if it's right or not. You can't do any more than that, because the hypothesis about what the benefits might be or might not be is generally different to the reality. So you've just got to run it and go with it and have open discussions and, be frank.
Right, so the people are just unbelievably, like, the most important thing. Who the person is who's coming to be part of your system.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, great. And then we had the one question at the back. We're almost there. It's almost 6:30.
Hi there. Tim, we spoke a few years ago, but we'll get to that later. But I just had a question about the social impacts of having lots of different people on the farm. They're doing their own project, they're making their own money, but also some aspects of certainly broad spectrum industrial farming, there tends to be less people on the farm, which can have kind of social, mental health issues and various things. Have you noticed any impact in that regard about having more people in and around the farms and discussions and socialising and things like that?
I mean, we never really didn't have people, so I can't really compare it so much. I know we have a lot of people who come to Henbant who are more conventional farmers, or maybe they're trying to kind of stack loads of functions by themselves. And I know that just having that energy of people on the farm, like, is so unbelievably powerful, just in terms of, just a positive space. And people come on farm, and they just feel the energy. Like, it creates an energy, you know, and actually, like, I don't know, it kind of becomes unstoppable. So that's the dangerous side of this. If you bring quite a few people into that space who are all quite passionate and we're all working to the same context, sometimes I could do if I had a little pause button, but generally, I think it is, like, I did quite a lot of, like, I don't call it mentoring work, and nearly every time I come back, it's just like, you just need to get some people on your farm.
I'm sort of aware when you can get too many people without a strong leader, that it can go a bit array, because if you give all the people all the decision making, it can all fall to. So you know, you need to stick to that clear goal and that clearly defined vision that you're trying to go to. Otherwise, it can all sort of go off on different ideas and loads of whims come in, and it kind of doesn't actually stay viable and sustainable. So you need the people, but there needs to be a strong leader at the front of it all.
And I think how we farm, how the majority of people farm now, it can be very often a farmer and maybe a part-time worker, and that's it, and that can be the only person that farmer sees all day. And we all know kind of the mental health stresses of farming. So this is kind of in a way, it's stepping back to how it used to be, and having that kind of lively atmosphere. So Renaud, a couple of days ago, he'd probably had quite a hard day, and then we had these 3 German ladies staying in the glamping, and they were ecologists. So he had a lovely time showing them around the farm. But it's just things like that. It's getting energy. But it's getting energy and people on the farm. And all of this is just surrounding yourself with positive people. And if you meet negative people, just decide to just move away. Move away. Move on. Yeah.
Totally. Okay, I'm just going to ask a final question, unless someone has you have a pressing question? Oh, no. Unless someone has a pressing question, I'm just going to ask you each a final question, which is, what have been the biggest challenges in starting your business? And then also, what is the most, enriching aspect of it all? You want to go first?
Regulations are... people like the Environment Agency, when you try and set up your own chicken processing facility, Environment Agency are just, no, that's not. And even if you give them examples of how it works overseas, they're just very wooden and stubborn. So I would say powers that be need to just get with the program, really, and be more flexible. And I think as far as positive things, it's people just really loving your produce and realizing, understanding the story behind it, believing in the story, and believing in you, really.
Great, thank you. Tim?
Yeah, it's people again, really, and people can be the thing that makes you sort of sweat, but also seeing people grow and develop, and you know, giving them the chance to start their new businesses, and seeing them, you know, be able to buy a house and things like that is just phenomenal when that works right. And when it doesn't work right, you can pull your hair out. So people.
No, exactly the same thing. It's all about people, and like they're the biggest challenge. Like, you know, like sometimes, like we've got 3 children, and my contact says I've got to enjoy myself, and every now and then, like you're like, oh, like this is just not quite, you know, like there is no pause button when you bring these people in, and so sometimes that can be super hard, but it's like, you know, it's like, is it better to be in love and like kind of miss out on, you know, is it better to like love someone and like lose that thing, but to have had all that excitement? And it kind of, with people, it's just worth that risk of all that excitement.
Great, thank you. Well, thank all 3 of you. Thank you so much for sharing. You are 3 of the more passionate farmers I know, so that was brilliant. Thank you. Thank you all.